So we finished talking about starch. Now we talk about glycogen. Remember the definition of starch? Starch is the storage form of glucose in plants, and glycogen is the storage form of glucose in animals. So what are some of the real life application for that? Remember in starch I told you that you can find starch in rice, so what you can do is chill rice for an extended longer time, and then you taste the sweetness of maltose. But here, what about glycogen? So how many of you are a marathon runner? For marathon runner, let's say tomorrow you have a marathon race tomorrow. What would you do the night before? I asked the same question to my physiology student. One of them is a marathon runner. She told me that, I'll eat a lot of carbs, like spaghetti. Why would the marathon runner do that? The reason is that when they eat a lot of carbohydrate or spaghetti the night before the marathon race, their body will break down the starch from, let's say, spaghetti, and then break it down into glucose. So they will absorb a lot of glucose the night before, and the liver will convert all this glucose into glycogen and store it in where? It will store the glycogen in liver and also in the skeletal muscle. Why? Because in the next day they will be running marathon. Their muscle require a lot of sugar to give them energy to go through the marathon race. So by loading up a lot of glycogen in the muscle, then it will give them the advantage of having lots of energy supply there when they run the marathon. So it is a good little trick. It can also apply to any other form of sports. If you know that the next day you'll be exercising a lot, you'll be doing some kind of long, very vigorous exercise tomorrow, then you can do the same thing. The night before you can eat a lot of carbs, so that the next day when you exercise you will be less exhausting. So what's the differences between glycogen structure with the starch structure? Glycogen has a lot of branching, has a lot more branching. As you can see that here on the picture, all these are the branchings of the glycogen. So glycogen has a lot of branchings. And if you take a look at here, it is a liver. Why the picture give you a liver here? Because as I told you before, glycogen is stored in liver and muscle. So they give you a picture of liver here. Okay, polysaccharide. So after we finish talking about starch and glycogen, then we talk about cellulose. Cellulose is the one that made up of the cell walls of plants. Remember, cellulose is not the storage form of plant. Starch is the storage form of plant, but cellulose is a structure. It's a structural protein for plant. It made the cell wall. Animal cannot digest cellulose, but bacteria can. Bacteria, they form something called a symbiotic relationship. Specifically, we call it mutualism. Mutualism is one type of symbiotic relationship. It is a win-win situation. So in this case, animal provide a safe environment for bacteria to live, and also animal provide food for the bacteria. And bacteria in turn digest cellulose into glucose so that animal can obtain can get more nutrient. So it is a win-win situation. Let me write it down. To provide a safe environment and also provide food for the bacteria to eat. Bacteria digest the cellulose so that cellulose becomes glucose, then the animal will get more glucose to eat as well. So it's like paying rent. It's literally paying rent. The bacteria pay rent in terms of glucose to the animal. We call it mutualism. It is a win-win situation. Another type of symbiotic relationship is called parasitism. Parasitism, of course, when you hear about the term, you think about parasite. Yes, this is exactly what happened. So in parasite, the animal or the host is being hurt by the parasite, and parasite is the only one that gains. So as you know, the parasite lives in the host, lives in the animal. So parasite get all the food and a stable, safe environment provided by the animal. But the parasite keep on absorbing all the food and nutrient from the animal, but the parasite does not provide anything back to the host or the animal. So the animal is losing a lot of nutrients. So the animal get hurt by having a parasite. So parasitism is that the host or the animal they have the disadvantage, but the parasite they have the advantage. So one is minus, one is plus. But mutualism is a win-win situation, so it's a plus. The host or the animal has advantage, and then the bacteria also gains advantage. Okay, how does cellulose look like? Cellulose, they have long chain, and they also form they have hydrogen bonds in between chains. And not only that, if you look at it carefully, the oxygen atom that is connected between the two glucose molecules, they are in an up-down orientation. But if you go back to the previous slides to look at the glycogen and starch structure, you can see that they are all the oxygen atoms, they are at the downward position. So that's one of the differences that make our body cannot recognize it. Meaning that our body cannot recognize cellulose because the oxygen atom is up, down. And then what do we use for cellulose? Well, we use cellulose to make paper, yes. Cotton, the cotton tip Q-tips, wood, for our furniture, and most importantly, digestive fiber. Digestive fiber in our food, they are the cell wall of the plant or vegetable or the fruit. So what happens is that since our body, we lose the bacteria, we don't have the bacteria to help us to digest cellulose. So what happens is that when we eat vegetables or fruit, then cellulose cannot be digested, so it will go all the way down to large intestine as something solid or something like a sandpaper. So when we have cellulose going through the large intestine, it actually irritates the large intestine. When our large intestine is being irritated, then our large intestine wants to get rid of it. How does it get rid of it? It will secrete mucus. to try to smooth down the passing of the cellulose. And it is because of the mucus that our large intestine secreted, then it will make our number 2 easier. However, when people, or especially young people, they stop eating vegetable or fruit, then they have less cellulose irritating their bowel, their large intestine. So the large intestine will secrete less mucus to smooth down the passing of the cellulose. And because of that, then you make the number 2 relatively more difficult. And what do we call this? We call this constipation. That's why if you are parents, or if you are or your parents will tell you, or you will tell your kids to eat vegetable and fruit because of this reason. But I have to remind you that constipation has more than one reason. Of course, lack of dietary fiber, meaning that if you eat less vegetable and fruits, it will give you constipation. But for example, if you drink less water, then it will also cause constipation. Or if you, let's say if you're getting old people usually have constipation because old people, they lose muscle mass. When they lose muscle mass, it's not just the muscle on the arm, on the leg, but they lose muscle in the whole body, including something called smooth muscle. Smooth muscle, they are the special form of muscle that made up of our GI tract. Our GI tract is made up of something called smooth muscle. When our GI tract is losing the smooth muscle due to aging, then our GI tract will not be able to contract or will that as strong as when we were young. And in other words, it will have a more difficult time to pass the food down the GI tract. When this happens, it will cause constipation as well. And then we will talk about another type of polymer or carbohydrate or polysaccharide. We call it chitin. Chitin, they make up of exoskeleton of arthropods or insects, whatever you want to call it. And then it also forms the cell wall of fungi, the mushroom. So that's all you need to know. I don't require you to know too much about chitin. And what do we use for chitin? Well, we use chitin to make edible food wraps or surgical thread, especially the absorbable sutures. Absorbable food suture has an advantage. We don't need to go back to the hospital and ask the nurse to take it out for us, because when we take out the normal suture, then the nurse has to give you a local anesthetic so that it won't hurt you when the nurse take out the sutures. The absorbable suture can be used usually inside your body. Usually when doctor performs surgery inside your body, and there are some organs that the doctor need to close up, then he usually use absorbable suture inside your body. And then in this case, you don't need to worry about the sutures stay in your body forever. So absorbable suture usually is used inside the body, but of course there are cases that people use absorbable suture on the outside of the body as well. So chitin is useful for human being, not just for insects or fungi. So let's have a brief review. Today we talk about 4 types of polysaccharide or carbohydrate. Starch. We can find them in plants. It's a storage form of glucose in plants. You can find them in rice. I told you that to chew rice for longer extended time before you swallow it. And then we have glycogen. Glycogen is the storage form of glucose in muscle. And there are And then we have cellulose. Cellulose is the it's made of cell wall, and then chitin. They are for making the exoskeleton of arthropods and cell wall of fungi. So that's it for today.